Hi guys, how y'all doing today? This is D Durrell with D Durrell Life Solutions. I hope everybody is having an excellent day. Today we're going to talk about, and for this particular session, we're going to talk about online fascination with psychological terminology. Now, I would like to say, as I get into this topic, that I have been extremely frustrated with the intensity and the fanaticism with certain mental health or psychology or counseling related terms that are highly misused. But I'm also going to talk about the disturbance. To me, what is disturbing is that when a professional like myself attempts to correct for the purposes of properly educating, not for egotistical reasons or to show someone, to make someone look bad, but to help people properly understand, it is highly disappointing in the responses that I had to endure and the abuse that I had to deal with in the last 6 to 7 years as it relates to this. When I first began my first channel, and the onset of that channel was geared towards me just simply providing psychoeducation about counseling and to help the community rid themselves of some of the myths and fallacies about therapy and mental health. Okay, so this is to assist culturally within the Black community, because again, my channel did focus a lot on Black mental health at the time. But any group of people, as a professional, I treat everybody. So within the American stratosphere, systematically understanding the proper usage and application of certain terminology so that you don't, misinterpret yourself. Because again, when we talk about self-diagnosis and self-evaluation assessment, that kind of goes in line with the misusage of the terminology. And so one of the biggest misusage of terminology is projection. A lot of times when people speak of projection, is not projection. Okay, they're actually speaking of other defense mechanisms that are more in line with the situation that they're experiencing. And also more in that is that with that situation, a lot of people tend to use these psychological terminologies whenever they are in an argument or conflict with someone that is in a disagreement with them, some type of adverse situation and interaction. So when we look at projection is characterized as a irrational thought process that is caused by a negative internal condition or feeling of oneself that they're uncomfortable with, and they tend to think that others around are also feeling, thinking, or behaving or have those same negative attributes. So if I'm unhappy in the office, obviously the other people in the office should also be unhappy. If I feel this way, if I think this way, if I do these things, we're definitely everybody else. Unfortunately, the person that thinks this is not comfortable with the fact that they are feeling this way, so they think others are mirroring that same behavior. A lot of times people misplace projection for what is called displacement. People don't use the term. You don't hear people use the defense mechanism displacement, but they love to use the term projection. Okay, but displacement merely means that it's an irrational response due to the anxiety of expressing one's feelings towards someone that you see as of a higher status or in a authoritative role or a superior role. So you take it out on someone else who is, that you may deem is not of a, I would say, an equal, not necessarily equal, but who cannot respond or affect your life in such a way that the other person who's in a superior role can. So, for instance, a person who is upset with their professor who's in an authoritative role may not necessarily express their true feelings to that professor, but they may take that frustration out on their girlfriend. They may take that frustration out on a fellow student. They may take that out on their children. They may take it out on another person who doesn't necessarily have that relationship with them. Okay? In many of those situations, people take out things on another content creator, another subscriber, panelist, whatever, or someone else that they interact with online, and really they're really upset with someone else who they refuse or are afraid of, or they feel somewhat inferior to, choose not to take that out on them, but they take it out on someone else. That is highly seen throughout any sector or any social media application. Displacement is never talked about because displacement is not necessarily pop culture, and a psychological term that's within pop culture. Now let's kind of talk about other terminology. Again, the overusage of narcissism. Expressing narcissism in such a way that, because when I talk about narcissism, I look at it from the perspective of narcissistic personality disorder. Because when people utilize the term narcissism, they're using it in such a way that people are systemically or have a pattern of behavior that this is who they are over time, that they act in such ways to other people. Narcissism is grounded in self-love. Narcissism is not grounded in the mistreatment of others. Although people who are narcissists do mistreat others, particularly those that don't believe in their heightened pseudo sense of self, meaning that it's fake with the way that they are presenting themselves. People that don't buy into the con game of them being at a higher level or that grandiose presentation of themselves, they may act out adversely to people that don't believe it. Okay, but narcissism is not grounded in just merely selfishness, because there are other illnesses, psychological illnesses that can be equally as selfish. You can have other illnesses and be selfish. You can just be a person who has a flaw and they show a certain level of selfishness, but that doesn't mean you're narcissistic. However, narcissism is utilized in so many ways, and it's all over the place. I'm actually exhausted with explaining what narcissism really means, because it's not grounded in how you treat people. It's grounded in your own inflated sense of self. Now, in your inflated sense of self, you may mistreat people, but it doesn't always mean you're going to mistreat others. Okay. So those are some of the things. Also, autism spectrum disorder. As a professional, and I'm going to say something that may be seen a certain way, I think that when the DSM is revised again, I do think that the criteria for autism spectrum disorder should be, and I think there's a necessity to relook at that, to maybe change and adjust the criteria. I'm not a big fan of the diagnostic criteria although I respect it and I have practiced it, and I do treat people, mainly those who are higher functioning with autism spectrum disorder. I don't agree with the fact that there were multiple mental health illnesses that were in the framework of what is called pervasive disorders and other communicative disorders that were kind of bridged into autism spectrum disorder. But I feel wholeheartedly as a mental health professional that the criteria for autism should be relooked at, and it should be adjusted, and even the assessment tools for autism, because there are people online who are acting in ways that 10, 15, 20 years ago would not be seen as autism. There are people who think that they have neurodivergence, automatically think they're autistic. And the fact of the matter is that I began providing services for autistic children probably about 20, 25 years ago. And some were high functioning, some were more medium, and then I had lower functioning too. And what I'm seeing today on social media is the I'm saying the examples of people reading without provision, without necessarily the getting a full context and the proper context of autism spectrum disorder from a licensed clinician with the experience of treating this population. But autism spectrum disorder is highly overutilized. Okay. So the other terminology that is highly overused is gaslighting. I've seen gaslighting used in so many ways that is not necessarily representative of the true usage of the term for gaslighting. Now, as a professional, I began hearing the term used mostly as it related to domestic violence situations and in relationships. The term gaslighting properly focuses on a person intentionally for a person purposely trying to manipulate someone in making them think that their thoughts and feelings or their perception of something is false, that they're wrong, and all the evidence is there to show that these things are happening. And so I saw this terminology used primarily in domestic violence relationships, and it spoke of the abuser gaslighting their victim, that you're the problem, I'm not the problem, or you made me do this. Just all these different irrational, all these different negative things that they would say, things that made little to no sense. And the person is manipulating you into making it feel like you're not, the thoughts and your perception is not reality. Now, as a professional, I think that it is very difficult that you're in California, someone is in New York, and you're interacting on a social media platform under the disguise of different names, different personas, and we're using the term gaslighting. As a professional, my professional opinion that the term gaslighting should be used primarily when there is direct communication or more direct communication under more realistic, a more realistic framework or a more genuine framework in which we know each other, we see each other, we touch each other, we're in direct communication with each other, and because there's so many levels to interaction on social media where both sides could be pretending. Both sides can be disingenuous. Both sides either are or multiple people. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that in some sense people are not gaslighting, because yes, there are people who interact through social media platforms who do gaslight, and it happens. However, as a professional, it's hard for me to determine what is truly gaslighting or not when the interactions are not necessarily built in realism. Okay, the interactions can be very faulty. The interactions can be actually predetermined and scripted. Okay, and that's just the reality of when you're on social media. These are the things that people are seeing, but these terms are used constantly, over and over and over. I was gaslit. This person gaslit me, and again, guys, you also have to understand that you also have to take into account the person, the truthfulness and the credibility of the person that understands what gaslight means, and if they are properly perceiving the interaction realistically and truthfully. Because there are people who get on here and will pretend that they never make mistakes and it's everybody else that's gaslighting them, when in all actuality they could be the person realistically gaslighting everybody else. So there are too many variables as it relates to gaslighting that can there are too many variables that can get in the way of that being properly used or seen a certain way. That's just my perspective as a professional. There may be other professionals who may think differently, mental health professionals, as it relates to gaslighting. But as a professional, when people say that someone gaslit them and so on, I tune it out, because I'm looking at the environment that we're functioning in. It's very hard to gaslight, in my opinion, people that you're not directly in communication with, and they could be operating under certain false pretenses, and we don't know if the interaction is scripted. Those same two people that were talking could have planned that interaction to create a certain response. And it's, to me, that's too many variables. Okay. But there are people, when I talk about these things, they don't like the correction, to the point where I decided to focus more on this channel and talk about it in certain ways and not correct people unless they ask me to. And in many situations, most situations, I didn't inject myself to correct people. They usually ask me, and then they didn't like what I stated. So those are some of the few of the terminologies that are used. Now, if there are others that you'd like to talk about, but those are, to me, the ones that stand out the most. When we're talking about gaslighting, we're talking about certain personality disorders, and also borderline personality disorders, also overused at times. Definitely narcissism, and things of that sort. It's overly used. It's overly used, and it's not only is it overly used, it's misused to not necessarily fit the label or the interaction or the behavior of people that they claim are associated with that. So guys, I am very, very interested in hearing your response to this particular video. This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. Hope you have a great day.